I've always thought people exaggerated when they talked about how bad in-laws could be. You hear the usual jokes about judgmental mothers, impossible expectations, or passive-aggressive comments over dinner. But I never imagined I'd end up living through a nightmare that would start with a glass of sangria. My name is Thomas. I'm a freelance photographer. I'm not rich, I don't come from a legacy family, and I don't wear suits unless someone's getting married or buried. But I love what I do and I'm good at it. That's always been enough for me. Unfortunately, it was never enough for Diane, my mother-in-law. Diane never hid her opinion of me. From the first day I met her, she made it clear I was beneath her daughter Haley. She didn't scream or throw tantrums, her disapproval came in sharp smiles and loaded compliments. "You're very independent, aren't you?" Thomas, or I suppose being creative, must feel so freeing. It was like walking through a field of landmines, trying to decode what she really meant while pretending I wasn't insulted. But the real story, the one no one would believe if I hadn't lived through it, happened at Diane's 61st birthday dinner. It was a cold Saturday night in late October, and Diane had insisted on a big family gathering at her home in Rosedale. Haley, being the peacemaker she is, begged me to just be polite for one night, and I agreed. I didn't want to cause trouble. Owen, Haley's younger brother, was in town with his wife Vanessa, and even their father Gerald was flying back early from a business trip to make it. That kind of turnout was rare. Dinner was the usual awkward affair. Diane had hired caterers to serve an elaborate 5-course meal. Everything was too formal, too polished. You couldn't relax. I could tell Haley was trying her best to keep things smooth. She laughed too loudly at her mom's dry jokes and kept checking on me with nervous glances. The drinks flowed freely. Diane loved to play hostess, floating around with wine bottles and acting like she was in some kind of period drama. At some point, she brought out a large crystal pitcher of homemade sangria. It was her signature drink, she said, made with wine, orange liqueur, fresh citrus slices, and a secret twist. She poured everyone a glass, and I accepted mine out of politeness, though I'd already had enough wine for the evening. That's when it happened. As Diane leaned in to serve my glass, I saw her hand hesitate just for a second before she reached into her apron pocket and subtly dropped something into my drink. It was quick practiced. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But I'm a photographer. I pay attention to detail like it's instinct. I watched the way the powder settled, dissolved. I watched how she looked up at me with a forced smile, then turned away without making eye contact. My stomach flipped. I told myself I might be overthinking it, but the way she rushed off, how she avoided me afterward, and the way my gut screamed at me not to drink, it was too much to ignore. I needed to be sure, so I excused myself quietly, pretending to take a call. I carried my glass with me into the hallway, thinking fast. I found an empty glass in the butler's pantry, and made a quick switch, pouring mine into the clean one, and taking a random sangria glass from a tray nearby, the one I'd later find out had been poured for Gerald, her husband. When I returned, no one had noticed a thing. We all toasted. Everyone sipped. I watched. Gerald drank the sangria originally meant for me. About 20 minutes later, things got strange. Gerald, a man usually composed and sharp as a tack, started slurring his words. At first, people laughed, thinking he was tipsy. But then he began sweating, swaying in his chair, and complaining that his vision was blurry. Diane rushed to his side, putting on a show of concern. "Oh no, what's happening, Jerry? Are you okay, darling?" But I was watching her, closely. Her performance didn't match her eyes. She wasn't panicked. She was scanning the room, gauging reactions. Owen called an ambulance. The rest of us followed as they took Gerald out on a stretcher. It was chaos, people calling out, Vanessa crying, Haley frozen beside me. I didn't say a word. At the hospital, the doctors said Gerald had likely ingested a strong sedative, something akin to Zolpidem. It wasn't fatal, thankfully, but it could have been dangerous if he'd been driving or had a heart condition. Everyone was baffled. They blamed bad shellfish, or maybe a reaction to wine. But I knew the truth. Diane hadn't expected Gerald to be the one who drank it. She'd meant it for me. That night, while Haley was asleep beside me in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling and thought, what kind of person poisons their son-in-law at their own birthday dinner? I knew I had to get proof. If I accused her without evidence, it would sound insane. Haley would be torn in two, and Diane would spin it to make me look unstable. No, I needed something concrete, something undeniable. The next day, I quietly retrieved the original glass, the one I'd switched, and brought it to a private lab near Queen Street for analysis. I didn't tell Haley, not yet. I wasn't just dealing with a bitter mother-in-law anymore. I was dealing with someone dangerous. Someone who wanted me gone, and I wasn't about to let her win. The morning after the dinner at Diane's house, I woke up with a single heavy thought pounding in my head. I had just watched a woman try to poison me, and no one else had noticed. Haley lay beside me, still asleep, her arm flung across my chest like everything in our world was normal. I looked at her peaceful face and felt a sting in my throat. How could I tell her that her mother, her own flesh and blood, might have tried to drug me? That the only reason I wasn't the one convulsing in the back of an ambulance was because I switched glasses in a moment of instinct. I couldn't, not yet, so I got up quietly, drove across town with the glass I'd kept hidden in a travel mug, and dropped it off at a discreet private lab I'd used once before while helping a friend with a wrongful eviction case. The tech there. Zara didn't ask many questions. I just told her I needed a fast toxicology screening and handed her the glass. "Rush it if you can," I said. "It's urgent." The report would take 48 hours minimum. That meant I had 2 days to pretend everything was fine. 2 days of smiling in front of Haley, answering her questions about whether I thought her dad was okay, and accepting Diane's check-ins via text. She even wrote, "So sorry about last night. Just awful. Gerald's doing better, thank God. Hope the sangria didn't upset your stomach, too." I stared at that broken heart emoji for a long time. It wasn't guilt, it was mockery. I needed more than a lab result, I needed a reason. Why me, why now? Diane had always been controlling, but poisoning someone was a different level. Either she was losing her grip on reality, or something had pushed her over the edge. I started to think back on recent weeks. Had anything shifted? That's when I remembered the will. A few months earlier, Gerald had mentioned very casually over beers on their back deck that he was reworking their estate plans. "You'll be surprised," he said with a wink. "I'm making things fair. Haley's the only one in this family who married someone who actually works for a living. Don't tell Diane, though. She thinks I'm losing it." I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Gerald had always been low-key more approachable than Diane, and I assumed it was just another one of his quirky dad jokes. But now it felt significant. If Gerald had indeed changed the will, and Diane found out I might inherit anything, especially more than her golden son Owen, maybe that was enough to make her snap. Money brings out the worst in people. Legacies even more so. I started quietly gathering details. First, I borrowed Haley's laptop while she was in the shower and checked her browser history. Nothing suspicious. But then I dug through a folder on her desktop labeled Wedding Docs and House Stuff, and buried in there was a scanned PDF of a draft estate plan sent from Gerald's lawyer. Haley must have forgotten it was there. My eyes scanned the text quickly. And there it was. Gerald had indeed divided their assets into 3 shares, one each for Owen Haley and me. Not Haley. Me. To Thomas Benton in trust for his contributions to the family and his support of my daughter. There was even a clause protecting me from Diane contesting the distribution. That must have made her furious, and I'd bet everything I had that she knew about it. So now I had a motive. The toxicology report would soon give me proof, but I needed more. Something I could use if she denied it. Something that didn't rely on a single test tube. That's when I remembered Diane's old kitchen security system. Most people wouldn't know this, but her house had cameras not just on the exterior but a few inside too, mostly for the housekeeper and caterers. She'd once boasted about it during a dinner, complaining that you just can't trust help these days. If that footage still existed, it might show her tampering with my drink. So I made an excuse the next day to swing by their house. Haley was at work and Diane was home alone. I brought flowers and said I wanted to thank her for hosting the dinner despite everything that happened. She seemed surprised to see me but played along. "That's very sweet of you, Thomas. How's Gerald? Poor man barely remembers anything." We sat in her over-decorated sunroom sipping tea. I looked for any way to bring up the camera system. "By the way," I said casually, "I noticed a couple of those little security domes near the kitchen ceiling the other night. Didn't realize you had indoor cameras." She froze for half a second, then smiled. "Oh, those old things haven't worked in years. Gerald always said we needed to fix them, but well, you know how men are." She was lying. I didn't press. Just nodded, made small talk, and left shortly after. Then I called a friend, my old roommate Jonas, who worked in private tech security. Hypothetically, I said, if someone told you there were security cameras in a house, and the owner claimed they didn't work, but you knew they probably did, could you get into the system remotely? He laughed. "Hypothetically, if they're still connected to the network, yeah. You'd need physical access for about 30 seconds, though." "Why?" I told him I'd explain everything later. That night, I convinced Haley we should bring Diane dinner the next evening to cheer her up after the Gerald scare. Haley, bless her heart, was thrilled I was warming up to her mom. The next evening, I brought a bottle of wine, a smile, and Jonas hidden in my car with a laptop. As soon as Diane stepped away to freshen up, I slipped into the kitchen, located the panel under the cabinet one I'd seen before, and plugged in Jonas's USB key. It took 15 seconds. We had access. 2 hours later, I was back at Jonas's apartment watching footage from the night of the party. There it was. Diane leaning over the pitcher of sangria, checking over her shoulder, and slipping something from a small container into a single glass. My glass. I paused the video. My hands were shaking. Now I had the truth. But the hardest part was still ahead. Because Haley didn't know any of it yet, and telling her might break her. I didn't sleep that night. The footage of Diane poisoning my drink looped over and over in my head. I kept asking myself the same question. Why didn't she just come after me directly? Poison was something you used when you wanted to hide the truth. It wasn't rage, it was strategy. Cold. Calculated. And that terrified me more than anything. Jonas had exported the footage to a secure drive, backed it up twice, and uploaded a copy to an encrypted cloud folder I controlled. You need to be smart about this, he said, handing me the drive. This isn't just family drama anymore. It's attempted murder. I nodded but didn't respond. I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. If I did, the fallout would destroy Haley. No matter how I framed it, her world would collapse the moment she heard that her mother tried to kill her husband. And if I was wrong, if somehow by some sick twist this wasn't what it looked like, I'd never earn back her trust. So I had to do one thing first: confront Diane, alone. I waited until Thursday morning. Haley had just left for work. I sent Diane a message saying I needed to speak with her privately in person. She replied within seconds. Of course, dear. Come by around 10. Gerald will be at physio and I'll make us coffee. I arrived at 9:50. The house smelled like lemon polish and French roast. Everything, as always, was picture perfect. She greeted me with her usual pristine smile, like nothing had ever happened. Like she hadn't almost killed me. Thomas, she said warmly, gesturing to the couch. You look pale. I hope you're not still rattled from the other night. Gerald's doing better now, thankfully. Quite the scare. I sat without speaking. I pulled the USB from my pocket, placed it on the coffee table between us, and looked her in the eye. I know what you did. The smile froze. Her hand hovered above the coffee pot. Her eyes darted to the USB. I don't know what you mean. You drugged my drink, I said. I have footage from your own kitchen. You thought the cameras didn't matter. Or maybe you forgot they were on. But they caught everything every step. I had it analyzed. The lab confirmed what you slipped into that glass wasn't sugar or fruit extract. It was lorazepam enough to knock someone unconscious. A beat passed. Then she slowly set the coffee pot down. Her hands didn't shake. Her expression didn't crumble. She just looked tired. Or maybe exposed. I didn't mean for Gerald to drink it, she said quietly. It was the first honest thing I'd heard her say in years. I was only trying to send a message, she added. To you. I leaned forward. Why? What could I have possibly done to deserve that? She straightened up, smoothed her skirt like she was about to give a speech. You don't belong in our family, Thomas. You've always tried too hard to seem perfect, responsible, principled, humble. But I see through that. You're a climber. Gerald saw potential in you, and it clouded his judgment. When he told me he was leaving you part of our estate, I warned him. But he wouldn't listen. So I did what I had to do. You tried to poison me, I repeated. I tried to protect my daughter, she snapped. You think you're helping her? She's blind to what you're really after. You would have let her father hand you our legacy on a silver platter, while you stood there acting grateful. I wanted to shake you. I wanted to show you that this family isn't yours to inherit. There it was. Not madness, not senility, just control. Fear of losing it. You were willing to sacrifice your own husband, I said bitterly. He wasn't supposed to drink it, she hissed. He was drinking whiskey, not sangria. It was a mistake. A tragic one. I stood up. I'm not going to the police yet. But you need to understand something if you ever come near me with anything like this again. If you try to manipulate Haley, or twist the story, this footage goes public. Gerald sees it. Haley sees it. Everyone sees it. She didn't respond. Her silence was louder than anything she could have said. I turned to leave, but then she called after me. If you show her that video, you'll lose her. I stopped at the door. She won't believe you, Diane said, or worse she will, and it'll break her. I knew she was right. That was the power she still held, not over me, but over Haley. And that was exactly what made her dangerous. I left the house with my mind spinning. I couldn't tell Haley. Not yet. Not until I figured out how to separate her from her mother's grip without destroying her heart in the process. Over the next few days, I played the role of supportive husband, while quietly observing every interaction between Haley and Diane. It was all smiles and gentle touches. But beneath the surface, I noticed it. Diane pulling strings, planting little comments in Haley's ear. Are you sure you're not doing too much for Thomas, or it's okay to prioritize your family over your marriage sometimes? I began to see it for what it was, a slow, long-game manipulation. Poison didn't have to come in a glass. Sometimes it came in words. So I made a decision. I wouldn't just defend myself, I'd take back control. And I'd start by getting Haley away from her mother. The hardest part wasn't carrying the secret, it was pretending everything was normal. After confronting Diane, something shifted in me. I couldn't look at Haley the same way. Not because I didn't love her, God, I loved her, but because every time she smiled, every time she laughed at something her mother said, I saw the wrecking ball dangling over her world. And I was holding the rope. Telling her the truth would crush her. But hiding it, that was eating me alive. I couldn't sleep. I barely ate. The only thing keeping me upright was the thought that if I played this right, I could spare her from both the betrayal and the fallout. I just had to get Diane out of our lives, quietly, carefully, and without alerting either of them to what I was doing. I started small. Haley and I had been planning to renovate the cottage Gerald left us up north. I suggested we turn it into a weekend retreat just for us. No cell reception, no guests, I said with a grin. Just you, me, and the lake. Haley lit up at the idea. I haven't been up there in years, she said. It'd be nice to get away. Exactly, that was the point. The first trip was in early spring. I stocked the place with firewood, wine, and every comfort I could think of. I made her laugh again. I reminded her of how good things were before Diane started circling tighter around our marriage. We watched the sun set in silence, her head on my shoulder. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was lying. But when we returned to the city, Diane's grip tightened. She called me 5 times, Haley said, checking her phone. I told her I'd be gone, but I think she panicked. Did she? I asked, playing dumb. She said she had a dream that something happened to us on the road. Haley murmured, confused. It's weird. She's been so anxious lately. That was Diane. Turning absence into guilt. Turning guilt into dependence. It was time for step 2. I convinced Haley to start therapy. You've been through so much lately, I told her gently. With Gerald's stroke, the pressure at work, it might help to talk to someone. To my relief, she didn't resist. She even thanked me. And once she started unpacking years of emotional burden, especially the unspoken expectations her mother placed on her, I saw a change. Subtle, but real. She means well, Haley told the therapist one afternoon, her voice uncertain. But sometimes I feel like I have to earn her approval. Like if I disappoint her, I'm failing as a daughter. The therapist just nodded. Where do you think that expectation comes from? The silence that followed was the crack I'd been waiting for. But Diane wasn't blind. She sensed the shift. A week later, she showed up unannounced at our condo, carrying homemade lasagna and a bottle of wine. Just wanted to surprise my favorite couple, she said sweetly. She kissed Haley on the cheek, smiled at me too brightly, and made herself at home. I watched her scan the room not out of curiosity, but calculation. She pulled Haley aside in the kitchen. I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but I caught enough. You're different lately, distant. Is he putting things in your head? Haley didn't respond, at least not that I could hear. But when they emerged, her smile had faded. And Diane stayed far too long that night. I knew I had to escalate, so I went to Jonas. She's slipping, I told him. But if I push too hard, Haley will shut down. I need a way to draw Diane out without revealing what she did. Jonas paused, then leaned forward. What if we didn't go after her directly? What if we exposed her tactics instead? That's when the idea hit. Diane prided herself on being untouchable. She didn't yell or throw things, she manipulated. Always subtly. Always deniably. But what if we documented that? What if we created a pattern, a paper trail? So I started collecting evidence. Texts, voicemails, comments she made in front of others that didn't sound like much in the moment but strung together told a very clear story. I even recorded a conversation between her and Haley where she said, "You don't need to tell Thomas everything, dear. Some things are better left between mother and daughter." That one stung. I kept a log of everything. Eventually, I sat down with our lawyer not to sue, but to ask for advice. Could we establish a boundary? Could we legally restrict her access if she became a threat to our well-being? The lawyer didn't give me a clear yes, but he did say something I clung to. Family isn't immunity. If she becomes dangerous, you have options. That gave me hope. Still, there was one problem I couldn't solve: Haley's heart. She still loved her mother, and I couldn't rip that love away from her even if it was built on lies. So I tried something else. I gave her space. I stopped pushing. I stopped questioning every visit, every phone call. I just let her feel what it was like to have peace when her mother wasn't around. I trusted her to start seeing the difference for herself. And slowly she did. "She's exhausting," Haley admitted one night, curling into me on the couch. "I feel like I can't breathe when I'm around her sometimes, like I'm constantly performing." "You don't have to," I whispered. "Not with me." She looked up, and for the first time I saw a crack in the foundation Diane built. But just as I thought we were turning the tide, something happened. A letter arrived. No return address, no signature. Just one line written in perfect cursive. "Ask your husband what really happened the night Gerald collapsed." Haley read it aloud, then looked at me. And just like that, everything I had built started to tremble. It was just a slip of paper. No name, no return address, just a single sentence. "Ask your husband what really happened the night Gerald collapsed." But for Haley, that line detonated something deep, something I'd been trying to bury under silence, affection, and well-meaning lies. She stared at the letter for a long time after reading it aloud. Then she looked at me. Her eyes weren't angry, not yet, but they were confused, and worse, scared. "Thomas," she said slowly, voice steady, "what is this?" I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. My brain scrambled for an explanation that wouldn't hurt her. Something clean, gentle. Something that would keep the world she knew intact. But there wasn't anything left that wouldn't fracture us. I paused, swallowing hard. "Where did you get that?" "It was in the mailbox. No name, just this." She waved the letter like it was burning her fingers. "So tell me, what is this about?" I should have come clean right then. But instead I hesitated just for a second. And that second was enough. "You do know something," she said quietly, stepping back. "Haley, please, it's not what you think." "Then tell me, what is it? Because this doesn't come out of nowhere, Thomas." I could see it. The gears turning. The pieces shifting. The weeks of subtle distance, the therapy sessions, the quiet weekend getaways, all suddenly under suspicion. She folded her arms across her chest as if bracing herself. "I want the truth. All of it." So I told her. I told her about Diane's role in Gerald's collapse. About the call I overheard, the coldness in Diane's voice. The way she told Gerald to lie still and let it happen because it would make things simpler. I told her I'd gone back to the hospital that night, that I'd heard things I couldn't unhear. I told her I'd confronted her mother and the chilling lack of remorse in her response. Haley didn't interrupt. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, rooted to the spot, like her body had turned to stone and her mind had gone somewhere far away. When I finished, the silence that followed was unbearable. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I didn't want to break you," I said. "I didn't want to destroy the way you saw your family. I thought I could protect you." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't blink them away. "That's not protection, Thomas. That's control." I flinched. I wanted to argue, but she was right. I had made decisions for her. Decisions I thought were noble. But in the end, I robbed her of the choice to face the truth on her own terms. "You let me think I was crazy," she continued, her voice shaking now. "All those little doubts I had about her. I thought it was just stress, or my imagination. But you knew. And you let me sit across from her at dinner week after week like nothing was wrong. I was trying to find a way to separate you from her gently without hurting you. You think this doesn't hurt?" I didn't have an answer. Not one that would make her feel any less betrayed. She sat down slowly on the edge of the couch like her knees had given out. I moved toward her instinctively, wanting to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. "I need space," she said, and it cut through me like a blade. "Haley, please." "No." She shook her head, wiping her face. "I can't even tell what's real right now. I need time. Alone." And with that she stood, walked to the bedroom, and shut the door. That night she didn't sleep beside me. I heard her crying quietly around 2 a.m., but I didn't go in. I sat on the cold kitchen tile with my back against the fridge, staring into nothing. The next morning she was gone. Just a note on the kitchen counter: "I'm staying at Monica's for a few days. I need to think. Please don't follow me." It felt like the beginning of the end. Jonas came by that afternoon. I told him everything. The letter, the confrontation, The silence. Someone's trying to burn the house down, I said bitterly. Someone who knows enough to wreck both me and Diane. Jonas frowned. Diane. It has to be her. Who else would send that letter? Who else stands to gain from blowing this up in the worst way possible? He shook his head. No, that's not her style. She controls people, she doesn't drop bombs. This feels messier. We sat in silence for a moment before he added, You sure she didn't say anything to anyone else? No threats, no loose ends? I replayed my last encounter with Diane in my mind, the sneer, the veiled warnings. But no, nothing clear. Nothing that screamed, I'm going to tear this all apart. Unless she wasn't the one doing the tearing. Jonas leaned forward. Then maybe the question isn't who sent the letter. Maybe it's why now. That hit me harder than I expected. Because he was right. Something had shifted. Someone had changed the rules of the game. And now Haley was gone. And I was alone with a truth that no longer belonged to me, but to the woman I loved and the war she was about to face. And somewhere out there, someone was watching it all unfold exactly as they planned.